Welcome to Leadership Pulse podcast. I'm Jay Sharma, your host. On this podcast, we invite various tech leaders to share their journey and insights with all of you. Today, we have Iain White with us, who is based out in Brisbane, Australia, and works as a CTO. Iain, why don't you take a minute and tell our audience about who you are and what do you do?
Right, thanks, Jay. I'm the CTO of Mer Solutions. It's a bit of a unique position. The company specializes in maritime salvage and inspections and health and safety of craft. So I take care of their IT side, mostly working with IT governance, and we have web apps that we actually use to do the inspection work. So I run a team of developers.
Wonderful. So my first question to you is, would you tell us about your journey from your beginning of your career to CTO? How did it go and what did you learn?
Certainly. I started off doing production and mechanical engineering at university. Part of that, there was a computing element, an automation element for manufacturing. And that got me into computer. My first real job was working for British Aerospace in the UK, mostly working on the Airbus aircraft. And I soon got on to being a team leader in software development. And I ended up there for about 5 years. At the end of it, I was actually on 12 steering committees nationally talking about CAD and CAM. That's where I realized I had a knack for talking and I guess shaping the way software was developed. I went into contracting after that, worked in various industries, finance, hospitals, and I started working for Reuters, the international news company. And during that time, I was introduced to JavaScript. And this was when JavaScript was completely incompatible across browsers. It was the Netscape IE was, and I loved it. It was a great challenge. It was like, oh, you have to program around the language you're programming in. I know a bit of a masochistic thing to say, but I really loved that. And I got heavily into the web development rather than desktop and mainframe development I've been working on previously. Unknown to me, there was a project taking place that was using an Oracle database and PHP version 3. Yes, I'm showing my age here. And I went, I can do that. And I started to learn PHP as well. So that's where I became a web developer and didn't look back. As most people at that time, I formed my own web development company based in Bristol in the UK. I mostly worked with a wedding portal that I developed, people doing wedding dresses, balloons, cakes, that type of thing. After about 2 years, I closed that down and went back into a management role, running web development teams, and I worked for ISPs and web development and marketing companies. And guess what I actually did was I migrated more into a senior role. I realized that the knowledge that I had from manufacturing could be applied to software development. Got into lean software development and started working with teams, mentoring. I became a certified Scrum Master. I started to do agile coaching within the companies I worked for and got into eventually doing the IT governance processes, procedures, which is where I ended up in the kind of CTO role where I'm running the whole kind of IT processing.
Cool. So you have been at multiple different places, from aircrafts to finance to healthcare to web development to whatnot. By the way, fun fact, I worked at Bloomberg, so I'm very deeply familiar with Reuters, So I know I got used to JavaScript there as well, because over a period of time, Bloomberg kind of shifted from X11 based UI to a JavaScript based UI embedded into the Bloomberg terminal. Cool. So tell us a little bit about how has your journey shaped up who you are today?
Yeah, I think one of the key changes in my career was when I read Gene Kim's The Phoenix Project book, which is a novel about DevOps. And I was slightly familiar with DevOps at the time, but what really sparked me was Dr. Goldratt's The Gong and his theory of constraints, which this Phoenix Project is loosely based on. And I went, I have a manufacturing and I've worked with just in time. I was familiar with the Toyota production system, about lean manufacturing, And I went, oh, what I've been doing, what I've been developing and what I've been teaching the people I work with has been around this kind of whole process. And I just kind of dived into that. I think that was the change of me being a software developer from a technical stack point of view to a leader from a lean/agile point of view.
Cool. Would you change thing or the order of things that you've done over your career based on what you know today?
I think the biggest change I would make if I was talking to my younger self is to be more confident. I mean, as I said before, I got into leadership fairly early on, but as most of us in the IT industry, I've had imposter syndrome. I felt I'm out of my depth and that I'll be caught out. But the reality is I'm good at what I do and I built up a toolkit. So it really just comes down to the fact that I could have probably progressed faster or further if I'd actually been more confident. I've got to peace with my skills now, but yeah, that's a lesson learned.
Cool. Something you mentioned in here was imposter syndrome. I think this term has been coming up quite often lately. So what would be your advice for younger professionals, like how to deal with imposter syndrome? I think imposter syndrome is more common than it is believed to be. So what is your advice to professionals, like how to deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, I find that all the time. I mean, I talk to people at all levels, from executive management down to intern, and it is a common feeling. I think it is a fact that people expect to be caught up, ridiculed, punished for their mistakes, and therefore they're not willing to step forward. And I think once you get used to putting your hand up and going, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, and not be punished for it. I mean, I always conduct non-blame postmortems when things go wrong, because we need the feedback from people. But it goes further than just treating people with respect and understanding and tolerance. It comes down to having a workplace where people feel they can be themselves. Most people are really, really good at what they do, but they don't see it themselves. And I think we as leaders in the industry need to give them that reassurance. It's not that they aren't capable of doing the job, they just worry that they won't. And I've seen people, or I've talked to people and heard from them, that they are paralyzed about speaking in meetings, about having a view, about contradicting a view that's come down from management. And that's the way to build really bad tech. Good development comes from questioning everything. There is no question. I mean, you need to have that open discussion. And I really feel that when you limit people with what they can do, I've taken a long time to realize that I don't know all the answers, but I know a lot of the questions, and that can help with other people's support to find the answers. And I just try to encourage everyone that I work with to, it is something, it's there, it is real. It is not something you go, oh, stop being imposter syndrome, you're good. Why are you doing that? It is real. It is something that we cannot help, but it's something we can encourage in others to get around.
Yeah, I think you raised some very interesting points about creating culture of trust where asking questions, acknowledging mistakes, being vulnerable is not punished. Right? So what would your advice be for those younger managers, the first-time managers, to not fall into the trap of, oh, you made this mistake, versus focusing on the actual mistake and not the person?
I think the first thing is command and control is gone, really gone. We need to have listeners, empathists, being empathic with people, understanding where they're coming from, understanding that we are not in a perfect world. There is interpretation of the work, and that really everyone has something to bring to it. I am a people person, and tech is second to the people. We need to understand what people are going through. I had a situation early in my career as a team leader that I inherited a developer who just wasn't working. He was literally listening to the cricket scores in the hallway rather than doing his job. And I had to obviously find out what was happening and discipline him for it. I started the conversation with, is everything okay, mate? What's going on with you? It's things like that. And he told me he had leukemia. He had weeks to live. And I attended his funeral shortly afterward. But that had lived with me very much ever since, and always ask what's going on, what's in their private life, what's affecting them, what they bring to work is the whole sum of who they are. And if they have distractions, if they have other issues, it takes in and summarize, just listen to your people, listen to what's happening, listening to their views. Are they bored? Are they limited? Do they feel they could do better? It's a vast amount of emotional, and it's not a kind of touchy-feely thing. It's real life, and you will get better work ethic and you'll get better quality of production if you do that.
Wow, such a profound story. But yeah, I think you make all very good points about being empathetic to the people, actively listening, what they're going through in their lives. Because at the end of the day, we are all humans, right? We are not robots. We just walk into work and just do work all day long. We have humans, even though we try to put a line between our personal lives and our professional lives, but we are humans. We carry over things from one side of that life to other side, right?
Yeah.
So actually, that's a good inflection point for us to kind of talk about a related topic. Off lately, there is a lot of conversation about work-life balance. I like to call it work-life harmony and demanding careers. Right? So how do you, as a CTO, find a balance between your personal life, your professional life, and your personal passions?
I think it's very important. I have actually been reflecting on this recently, and what I was thinking is work-life balance starts at the interview. I always ask an interviewee what their hobbies are, their pastimes, etc. Now, obviously, tech developers, they normally say that they're into science fiction or video games, etc. But what I'm looking for is people that go hiking, go fishing, have a life outside work, do things that are in the open air, do things that are different. I mean, personally, I hike, but really, person needs to come with the idea of having a balance. Yes, most of the work-life balances come down to the company's policies, but people need to be able to switch off and relax. In a more senior management role, you are on that kind of 24-hour call. Sometimes for software development, you are doing nighttime releases, you're doing out-of-hours things. Sometimes you have to do weekend. I try to limit that. I won't send emails outside of normal hours. Even when time zones are different, I'll try to make sure that people are not being disturbed. But I do feel that there is an option to do work from home. I'm lucky that I'm fully remote. Now, that is because we don't have an office, because even my CTO is currently on a ship. He's been helicoptered out to a ship that's on fire in the middle of the ocean. So there's no point in us having an office. So I am used to working fully remote. With today's technology, internet connections, systems like this with cams and headphone, you can communicate. There is challenges with working remotely. And I think this is an important thing. Is when people talk about not returning to the office and working from home, you have to understand that we still need a connection. If it's about people, as I said earlier, we need the people to talk to each other. If that's non-work related video call, if it's having shared games, so everybody's having pizza together, even in different locations, etc. But I really feel that work should be within work hours. If you finish at 5 o'clock, you should finish at 5 o'clock. If your work is finished early, I'm happy for you to leave early. I'm happy for people to change their hours. I'm happy for people to have days off for appointments or come in late or work that night, etc., provided it suits the team. And I think this is a vital thing. Is people can be individuals, but the team, you need the core time that people are there to talk to each other, and people need to be available when questions need to be answered. But really, from a company point of view, I'd like to have as much flexibility with the people that report to me as possible. And as I said to start with, they need to bring part of it as well. They need to have something to do outside work that they're passionate about. I'm happy to talk about that, whether that be Friday afternoon drinks or catching up over lunchtime. It's important to share.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Actually, something that caught my attention during this conversation, you talked about working remote, and then not having to go to office, which I think a lot of people like, a lot of people prefer that way. But this also poses a challenge in terms of how do you bring that human connection between people when they're working remote, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, particularly in my role, because I'm somewhat remote from them with what I'm doing anyway. And in the Toyota production system, they have a thing called walking the gambit, which is to be on the shop floor and see what's happening. And that's what you miss when you're working from home. You don't know what's happening. People's body language, when people are super excited about a task they're working on and they're all chatting together, when people are depressed, when a senior dev dumps work on a junior or an intern and they are obviously upset by it. These are the type of things you miss. So having informal catch-ups, having an open door policy, open online door policy, being there for people, still having the one-on-one meetings, having skip meetings, making time to talk about how people are feeling about their day and how they're reacting. If they feel lonely, if they feel they don't have a voice, particularly when we have these multiple Zoom meetings and everybody's sitting there kind of glazed over eyes, oh, again, is your mic on? And try to do fun activities. There's lots of icebreakers out there, but do fun things. Make sure people interact and talk. Some people are shy, some people are introverts, and some people need that extra prompt. We try to make sure that even the person that isn't contributing has a voice, or at least has the opportunity to have a voice. It's a fine line between, calling people out, almost forcing them to talk, and giving them an opportunity to go, well, what did you think about that? Or do you have a view for that? Or do you agree with what Jim just said? Things like that.
Yeah, no, that's very important. And I 100% agree with the point you made about one-on-ones and asking them how they're doing and whatnot. So I think that's very useful, asking open-ended questions and kind of trying to hear the unsaid is like how I used to call it, or I like to call it that way. Cool. So wonderful. Thanks for sharing this. Let's shift gears and talk about what is your biggest failure and how did you overcome it?
I think my biggest failure, I guess it's not really a failure, but it was a mistake. Fairly early in my career, I did a lot of presentation, attended a lot of meeting, a lot of national UK and even some international into Europe. And I thought I was very good at what I did, but then the penny dropped that I was good at lecturing people, but I wasn't particularly good at presenting or public speaking. And I realized that I was good to get information over. I was a technical person that could talk technical to technical people, but not always correct for the audience. I joined Toastmasters International, a speaking club, and I actually specialized in doing humorous speech competitions, a few of which I won. And that got me used to being more informal in how I talk to audiences. It also helped with the whole relationship with the audience. I've got this recurring theme about people first, and that allowed me to talk in different terms, to talk to the room correctly, to understand my audience, to see when I was losing people and stay on focus. And I think that was a big mistake that I corrected early on.
Nice. I think you kind of talked about in between, you were good at sharing information, but not good at presenting. What do you mean by that? Like, can you elaborate for our audience?
I could go up on the whiteboard and I could draw out the system and give them a detailed understanding of the system and go, ta-da, that is how it works. But I couldn't tell them a story. I couldn't take them on a journey. I couldn't tell them why we were doing it. I couldn't engage them. I was presenting me or my view to them rather than giving them what they needed.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's the important piece of any presentation, be it a written document, be it a slideshow, be it a in-person presentation, that need to address the problem for the audience and not just, here is what I have for you, right? So wonderful advice. I think you also made an interesting point about Toastmasters, and then you specialize in like humorous presentation is what I heard, or did I hear it wrong?
Yeah.
So tell us more about the tech. What does it mean? Like
Toastmasters is divided into regions, and the clubs compete against each other, and then they nationally compete in their competitions. And one of the main categories is the humorous speaks, which is basically just, I guess it's like it's not an open mic kind of laughing presentation, but it is something humorous. I once did a speech entitled "How to Roast a Person Over a New Oven which was about banging up, and obviously the pun on asking questions and roasting them and actually roasting, etc. So this is the type of thing I did. Every meeting they do this thing called table topics. It's when they fire random questions at you and you have to go up and without thinking, you have routine, you're walking from your seat to the podium, you have to think of an answer. And they did monthly humorous versions of these, and I got several certificates for having the best humorous story from a random talker. And they would say something like, oh, tell us something funny happened when you were walking the dog this morning, and you'd have to come up with it. And it was purely to get out of my comfort zone. It was purely to go from I'm a tech guy telling you tech stuff to I'm somebody that can tell you a story that will engage you and that you will enjoy listening to.
Yeah, and I think I'm super curious. I would love to, if the time permits, we'll love to give you a prompt towards the end of the discussion. Maybe we hear a humorous story from you. Love it, Iain. Love it. Cool. So shifting gears again, I think the way I like to see things is behind every successful person, there's usually a village that kind of took that person to the heights of the success that they are. So who are the 3 people that have been most influential in your life?
I've got to start with Des Ball, who was my manager when I worked at British Aerospace. He was great, very, very intelligent guy, but I was COBOL and Fortran programming at the time. I would go up to Des and I would ask him about how to do something. I'm stuck. I don't know how to do this, how to do that. And he would give me a half-hour lecture. He would talk about memory use, disk I/O, all these good low-level things back in the day were important to take. And then he'd finish it off by saying, oh, but there's a function call now. It's in the manual under whatever. And that taught me how to do the job properly. That, to me, made the difference between being a software engineer and a programmer. I wasn't just writing code from the manual. I was learning how computer systems work. That was big influence in my life. I say the next thing that kind of helped shape me is I was attending a conference and I was lucky enough to have coffee with Rasmus Ladolf, the creator of PHP. And the guy was so down to earth, so laid back. For somebody that created his own language, he was just a normal guy. And that kind of opened up my eyes. I met a lot of people who have invented languages and a lot of people that are release managers for big applications that we use every day. And they're normal people. They're like you and me. They get up, they come to work, they change the world by the code they write or the systems they manage. And that really, to me, put that human back into what we do in tech. Because I struggled to come up with a third person. I mentioned before that I'm a great fan of Goldbrack writing, also very fond of lean software development by Peppercox and Deming's quality control systems, etc. So I've never met any of these people, and most of them are dead now. But I think they have shaped my career in a lot of ways from what they've actually put out in the world in their book.
Wonderful. You talked about your manager who taught you to how to become a programmer and not just a software engineer who was just coding and whatnot. Or was it other way around?
It was the other way around.
Not a programmer and become a software engineer. Yeah, right. My bad. I think that reminds me of story in my early days when I was still in school and during an internship. And this is in the days of desktop applications, like web applications were not that common. And we were building a licensing server using C++. That was the programming language that I mostly coded in. And, we built a licensing server that would use distributed the component object model that Microsoft launched many months ago. And everything was working great. We were like, oh, it's awesome. Look at this, how great we did. And we called our manager to look at this. And, it was me and one other intern. And the manager comes in, he bends down and pulls out the network cable and says, let's see what happens now.
Yeah.
Like, after what time would you release the license? And I'm like, oh, we never thought about this, right? Because we were so focused on managing the license, we didn't even think about what will happen in the real life. We know network trips. It's even very reliable, but it will trip, it will fault. So that day was the day that kind of changed the way how I think about software engineering, how I think about building systems. Ever since I always look at the sides, the blind spots, the things that will fail the system. Happy path, everybody's looking at. The unhappy path is what most people are often overlook. Cool. Let's shift gears again. You've been a seasoned tech leader, so I would want to ask you, what is one myth in the tech industry that you want to debunk?
I think the big thing is that, as you said, you can control everything. You certainly can't. It's the edge cases that will always trip you up. It's the reliability on it will just work. And it's what do you do when the disk is full and you're copying a file? What do you do if you have a power fail, you're partly through a transition? What happens if you're writing to a database and it goes offline? I think the ability to think and plan is important. We can't just write code. There's a lot of people out there that are very good, what I would call script kids. They've looked at things online, they've read some books, they can do JavaScript, they can write really nice applications, mobile apps, etc. But they don't understand some of the fundamental building blocks of what make an application. And that is vitally important. And I think the whole idea that the tech will work, we need to know that the tech won't work unless we cover these cases. And I sound like a broken record here, but people, that it's not about the tech. It's not about the stack you're using, the programming language you're using, the latest best framework. It's about the person's ability to use that toolkit, whether they're managing a team, whether they're a scrum master, whether they're a product owner getting requirements from the stakeholder. It's how they interact and how they gather that information that's important. I'm very much people over tools, but I'm also multiple tools over one. I've learned a lot of frameworks. I know processes. I like to pick and change, a bit to here, a bit here. What suits the person doing the work? What suits the client? There's no point in taking people down the road and saying, I need a 25-page document about this story that you want me to build in this mobile application if that person's not going to do the work. You're going to go, hey, can we have coffee and catch up and talk in person about how you're going to do this?
Yeah. So what do you think is the reason why people don't understand? I come across many people as well, who know how to build software, but they don't understand the nitty-gritties of the finer details. What do you think is the reason for that? And how should we address that as these younger people come and become leaders? How do we instill that knowledge, information?
Yeah, I normally use the metaphor is that almost all of us can write. We can put together sentences, paragraphs. We could probably write a book, but not all of us are best sellers. Not all of us have got international best-selling reference books. But at the end of the day, I think that's it with code development. There's a lot of people that can do the basic core job, but they're not at that level that they understand the nuances that are required from large, complicated, distributed enterprise level system. I've worked a lot with interns. I do a lot of mentoring, and I try to establish the importance of edge cases and what ifs. I find the light bulb comes on after 3 or 4 sessions, and it's like, why you tell me this is so hard? I can do this in one line. I found on the internet site that does this. I've done a course on this. This is how it works. There's a call for it, and then they go, oh, yeah, it doesn't work, or there's a problem here. And I try to instill in the people doing the work, people writing the code, but for the leaders, I focus more on the fact that it is their job to educate people that there is more than working software. There's maintainability, there's scalability, and the lifespan of it. Most software is written and forgotten about. People do not consider, well, what happens when we retire the software? What is going to be the replacement? I mean, working in large firms such as Amazon and Microsoft, that's part of the process. But if you're working in a startup with 10 people, it's like, let's get out the door, get it on the web store, get it up on AppleCare, and you go, well, hang on, what's going to happen? What are we going to do with the 1,000 users that have signed up to this if we go out of business? And it's a question of just asking these questions, getting people into that mindset where they don't accept it's a 5-minute change, let's do it. I've always had the saying, it's not a question of can we do this, it's a question of should we do it. Don't add features that we don't need, and don't assume that what we're building is going to be used forever by everyone. Life changes. So many companies have gone out of business. So many companies have done massive product changes.
Yes, absolutely love it. And I loved the idea of keep it simple, don't build the features that we don't need, just simplicity, do the needful, and think about broader picture. Love it. All right, Iain, let's shift gears again. I know you and I connected on LinkedIn, and that's how we got to know each other. So where do you think our listeners can find you? This is your plug to share all the places where you can be found online and people can interact with you.
Okay, so I'm currently redesigning my website. As normal, as somebody that used to do websites for a living, I'm not getting very well at my own website, but my website is Iain, Iain White, colour white, WHITE.com. It will be totally different soon, but my LinkedIn profile is probably the easiest way to contact me, which is iWhite at LinkedIn. And
wonderful. And for all the audience, I will leave all these details in the description below. So,
thank you.
You don't have to memorize it now. Cool. Let's shift gears once again. You have seen, you started in COBOL, back in the day, and then you moved on to desktop and web and whatnot. So what emerging technologies do you think will impact this industry in the coming, let's say, next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, 5 years is so long in IT. 2 or 3 years, the landscape changes so much. But obviously, the big thing now is AI, machine learning, and particularly things like ChatGPT, etc. Personally, I think we're not there yet. I see so many horrendous mistakes coming out, particularly in the image generation from them. Great software, really clever, low entry level, the prompts are easy to come up with, but it's not got that stability in long term. Everybody's doing the whole, what jobs are going to be replaced with it. It's a tool. Like anything else on a computer, it's a tool. You can use it well, but I see that changing. I see the AI, the prompting, the suggestion becoming as commonplace as we use autocorrect for spell checking. The whole write a document or an email and get 3 or 4 versions of it. And I think this is particularly important with people with learning abilities like dyslexic people and people that can't use keyboards, etc. This ability to enhance and refine and put a more professional level onto it is where AI is going to come in. I think edge computing is taking off. We all migrated to the cloud, and I think now we're going to be migrating to the edge. And I just feel that the IoT hasn't really been tapped that much. Yes, we have smart everything, fridges, etc. But I think that small little devices that are connected are going to become a lot more popular for tracking delivery, vehicles, things like that. But that opens up the whole cyber and security side of it. I feel this is an area that we as a industry needs to get a lot better at. I think cyber is almost a lip service. It's done after the fact. We've had a lot of breaches recently, and I think it needs to be a board level decision. I think the CEO, Dan Woods, needs to buy into security, and I think we're going to see a lot more security people hired. I don't have anybody in security working for me. I dabble a little bit, but I outsource my security. But I feel that like we have infrastructure, and we say we're using AWS for our infrastructure, and we are using these servers. We're using this to do our security. I think it can become very much a mainstay of the technology stack.
Absolutely. I think security needs to be thought at the time of design and not an afterthought. And similarly, in AI, this aspect of responsible AI, like AI is prone to, amplify human biases.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So how do we keep that in check? How do we, do it from the design stage versus that is an afterthought? So fantastic.
Yeah, I have spent several hours trying to get the images to be not just European people. It's like, how do you get a prompt crafted in such a way that you get a diverse culture, gender, and age? And it's just, that's not obvious because there's this bias in the system.
Yes, absolutely. Cool. So we are coming closer to the end of the discussion. So I have only a couple more questions for you. Knowing what you know today, what advice would you want to give to your younger self?
I think the main thing is to be confident. As we were talking before about the imposter syndrome, maybe get over that quicker because of being more confident, but take more chances. There's been very few times where I've been outspoken or pushed a view where I've actually had a negative consequence for it. And I think when you're young, you are naturally worried about that, have a fear of doing it. And I think if I could have the ease I have now to be disruptive, to be challenging, to think outside the box, that would be really good to actually have at a younger age.
Cool. I have 2 more questions for you. I'll start with, if time, money, effort was no constraint, what would you be doing? What would your ideal self doing?
Ideally, I'd have a log cabin by a lake in the mountains with a pack of dogs. My dogs disappeared from the office here, but like to be in nature, but with super fast internet connection. Not real reality, but wouldn't like to be offline for too long. I'd like to be able to get out in the wild with minimum effort. But I'd also like the comfort of having multiple monitors and access to the internet. My main thing I'd like to do is develop something that is used. Most of the applications I've developed in my time as a developer have had small niche markets or had an entire company behind them, and it's been like a product that's also used. I would like to be one of these people that can do something world changing. I don't know what that would be. And as you said, time and money and effort. It'd be great to do a, top selling mobile app or website that actually makes value to people, that is used by millions of people throughout the world. But that's just a pipe dream. Maybe in my retirement, I can get all of that.
Awesome. I wish you good luck for that. Right. All right. My final question to you, what would be a final advice you would be offering to the aspiring leaders in the tech sector?
The best advice is get a mentor and mentor people as well. You both be a mentee and a mentor. And I think if you're going to understand people and the relationship between work and people and work-life balance, as we mentioned earlier, you need to be talking to as many different individuals as possible. Don't be a niche developer. Don't be restricted within your one company. Get out there, attend conferences, listen to podcasts, read books, understand things. Even if your job is the Scrum Master and you are focusing on Scrum, look at what's happening elsewhere. Look at XP, look at Kanban, look at Prince2, look at anything else that may be important to enhancing your skill. Just continue learning and talking to other people in your field. You may not always agree with them. They may not always give you value, but they'll give you options and opportunity. And people's life lessons learned. There's so much knowledge out there that people can transfer. When I'm dealing with people that I mentor, interns, which I've dealt with a fair bit, quite often in the middle of a meeting, I'll go, oh, learning moment. This thing happened, 20 years ago, this was the thing to do. Or like there was one stage where the CEO popped his head into the daily stand-up and basically backed a whole lot of instruction that totally changed the base of the work we're currently doing. And the interns in the room basically had that look of panic on their face as they do. And I explained, well, this is how these things happen. And this is how you react to it. And this is a conversation I will have with him when we leave this meeting about how inappropriate what he did was and how I will manage up. And it's these type of things that are vital. The more people you can have in your network, the more people you can talk to and learn these little things about how to navigate the changes in life that will happen, part of the work and part of the home life.
Wonderful. I'll summarize it for our viewers and listeners. At the end of the day, it's all about, investing in yourselves, finding time, learning new skills, networking, becoming a mentor, and finding a good mentor for yourself. And as you all have heard, Iain is a mentor as well. So if anybody's interested in being mentored by Iain, please reach out to him. Thank you, Iain. It was wonderful talking to you. Thank you for coming on our show. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I hope our audience will have learned a lot as well. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.